I spent the past few years memorizing the streets and geotagging businesses in Mumbai, studying the recruitment structures for Mexico City's gangs, and trying to define a line between formal and informal product lines for some of Colombia's cartels. Maybe not exactly what my parents had in mind for me, but I learned a lot about business along the way. For a lot of people, this is what we think of when I talk about business. We think about modern glass structures, carefully choreographed transactions, interactions, hard skills, soft skills, and everything in between. But for a lot of people, this is what business looks like. This is where the informal economy thrives. In India, 4 out of 5 jobs come from the informal economy. We see people working in textile manufacturing. They produce a lot of the clothes that we wear. They cut tiles for the floors of bathrooms and for hotel roofs. And we see them working in childcare or baking, selling fish, many of the things that are integral to keeping societies running. For Brazil, this number drops to a little bit below 50% of employment coming from informal economic activity. Again, we see them in retail, manufacturing, private security. An estimated 8% of US GDP comes from informal economic activity, though I suspect this number is a little bit low. For example, there are 11.7 million undocumented immigrants living in the United States. We see them picking fruit, delivering takeout, taking care of children, washing dishes, and so many other activities that are integral to keeping the United States economy running. When I say that I study the informal economy, most people assume that I'm talking about black markets. And sometimes I totally am. But the rest of the time, I'm also talking about all these other activities that are so integral to society that we often let them go by completely unnoticed. Why are they informal? Sometimes there's a massive barrier to entry. Sometimes it's easier to stay off record. And sometimes an idea is too new and too fresh to really throw it out there into the formal. For a number of reasons, some workers have a really hard time entering the formal economy. The informal economy presents an attractive alternative. There are resources, networks, and a space to experiment. In some ways, the informal economy is like a real-world incubator. New business owners can try new products and test them and see how it works inside of a community. Existing business owners can play with rules of business and see if there are other communities that might accept them better. And workers can start to carve out a niche for themselves when they otherwise might not be able to. In my years exploring these ecosystems and these alternative spaces, I've learned a lot about business, and I'd like to share a couple things that I've learned from the informal economy with you today. First, your reputation really matters. Pablo Escobar was an informal entrepreneur who at the height of his career was earning $60 million a day. The Medellin cartel trafficked cocaine internationally, but his particular brand of business centered a lot on violence and fear. In order to get the job done, he was not afraid of being aggressive and taking out whoever he needed to make sure that his cocaine was going to go where it needed to go. His rival, on the other hand, the Cali cartel, kept a much lower profile. They were a group of businessmen. They were very focused on having business plans, negotiating, having other alternative product lines that you could focus on, and they stayed away from violence as much as they could, resorting to it only as a last opportunity. For this reason, it was a lot easier for the Cali cartel to align with the Colombian and US governments when they decided to take out Pablo Escobar on the war on drugs. And it gave them a couple more years in an extremely lucrative market. Lesson 2. Successful informal businesses are extremely responsive to the needs of their customers. In particular, informal business is very good at tracking government activity, civil wars, and other events that may affect consumer behavior. For example, in Yemen, when the foreign currency exchange bureaus limit access to foreign currencies, and the future of Yemen's real seems a little uncertain, foreign currency entrepreneurs will appear in various parts of the city very strategically and offer financial security in the form of American $100 bills and Euro 500 bills. It's a lot easier to carry these around and conceal them than gold or jewelry might be. You can keep them concealed and on your person at any time. See what I mean? Lesson 3. Community is an essential part of every business. Without massive marketing budgets, a lot of these communities rely on word of mouth. They rely on their customers to give them feedback and help them improve their products, and in the end, essentially, your product needs to speak for itself. There's one street in Queens that at night turns into a giant informal food festival, and I love going. It's full of all these informal street carts because it's sort of a second shift. What happens is it's really hard to get a street cart vendor license in New York City. There's been a wait list that's been closed for several years. If you want to have one, it costs about $22,000 to have one for 2 years. And on top of that, you have to go through several different departments of government to get one. Really intimidating if you don't speak English particularly well. What happens instead is that the people who have formal street cart licenses will rent some of their licenses to a second shift. So it goes from a formal shift of workers to an informal shift of workers, and this becomes a night street market of sorts. These informal street market vendors are very careful to assure you that despite their less regulated existence, they are in fact the cleanest, best priced, and tastiest option on the street. The number of times I've been invited inside of a street cart to be assured that this is in fact the cleanest space I will ever be is wonderful. And they're very responsive to the needs of their customers. They frequently ask you, is this what you wanted it to be? Am I missing something? How can I change this product to be what you want it to be? In economies where bureaucracies become overly burdensome, regulations really hard to follow, and there are other resources that exist in your community, the informal economy offers an alternative ecosystem that is sometimes a lot more fun to play in than the formal economy. The entrepreneurs I've spoken to in Mumbai, Mexico City, and Queens can tell me where their suppliers got their products, how they'll start reinventing them for their product, and how their customers will use them in the end. It's kind of like talking to an MBA without all the smoke and mirrors and fancy language. The entrepreneurs I've talked to are creative, resourceful, and so courageous. I think in the next couple of years, we'll see a number of really interesting products and new business models emerging from the informal economy. All businesses would do really well to keep watching them closely. Thank you.